Welcome to the Retail Media Moguls podcast, brought to you by Platform 195. We share trends and strategies across retail media to help you accelerate your brand growth. I'm your host, Stuart Adamson. Welcome to the Retail Media Moguls podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Adamson, founder and CEO of Platform 195. Today, we're excited to welcome Dany Satine, the Group Head of Retail Media and Digital Platforms at Kingfisher plc. Dany is a seasoned leader with over 14 years of experience driving innovative digital product strategies and e-commerce initiatives across renowned organizations like Booking.com and ABA English. His expertise in navigating complex organizational structures and his strategic vision have made him a pivotal figure in enhancing retail media and e-commerce operations for some of the biggest names in home improvement and DIY. Dany's career is testament to his passion for leveraging first-party data, optimizing omnichannel strategies, and leading cross-functional teams to deliver exceptional results. And with a proven track record of scaling operations and fostering business development, he's well-versed in turning ideas into impactful strategies that drive growth. Today, Dany is going to share his valuable insights on the evolving landscape of retail media in the DIY and home improvement sector and offer a glimpse into the future of this dynamic field. Welcome to the show, Dany.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for an amazing introduction.
That's okay. It was a long one, that one. Listen, we were just actually talking just before we started about your background at Booking.com. Tell me about that first and how you suddenly got into Kingfisher and the evolution of that.
So I think that Booking was the pinnacle of me understanding, okay, this is where I come from in terms of advertising, because my background was in advertising. And then when I got into a full digital data-driven company and understanding how can they leverage that data, not only to activate their customer to drive more sales, but also how can we leverage that for partners to utilize and activate that data and do co-op investments or co-op campaigns. So that's how I start realizing, okay, this will become something that will evolve into a revenue stream that will drive companies into another type of business, which is not natural. Hence, this is retail media we're talking about today. And understanding that profiling and doing segmentation of customers can unlock and many untapped opportunities, right? So either is through an offline channel or on-site or through your CRM channels. We were delivering those capabilities at Booking.com just to drive more bookings with partners. And that was the mandate that we had at Booking back then, and how it started to form into now my natural space in Kingfisher in retail media.
So when did you join Kingfisher?
That was almost 40 years ago. And it was a very interesting moment because we were already stepping into the pandemic. And that was a trigger in Kingfisher to accelerate digital. It was an exciting moment to join, basically because we had many stores that were closed. So we accelerate the way we expanded our choices to our customers through our online channel. And that was the motivation to launch our marketplace model, right? We had it in our plans, but the pandemic accelerated this. So how do you offer more what you have in stores online through third-party sellers? And that was very exciting. Now we have 4 marketplaces live across all our operating companies, and we see that performing very well.
And which ones are those?
B&Q, Casa France, Casa Poland, and Brico in Spain and Portugal.
Wow. So when you joined, was that a pure retail media role? Had they actually decided that's what they wanted to do? Or did you decide to join as something else and then they went, hang on, there's something in this retail media thing?
This has been an evolution, right? So part of increasing our digital participation in sales started with marketplace. But back then we defined our next big bets, right, in digital. One of those was retail media. But we needed to secure our e-commerce platform, make it scalable, make it data-driven, ready for engage with marketing channel, and how it was connected to our stores, which is still a huge chunk of our sales goes through stores, especially when you talk about DIY and home improvement. So when the moment was right, probably almost 2 years ago, it's when we said, okay, let's start our retail media adventure. And here we are. We have 3 live retail media networks, two more to come in our operating companies. And it's becoming a much more, let's say, amazing workload to launch, but very exciting at the same time, understanding how a retail media network can be localized in each of our markets.
Let's take a market. Let's take the UK, for example. Tell me about that retail media network. What are you now offering to partners? And presumably it's B&Q here.
B&Q, correct. So B&Q right now has its initial capabilities in terms of on-site. We're trialing in-store and off-site, but just for us to test. There's something that we are very conscious of. We know that it's a high margin business, but we first need to understand how can we provide the service to our partners and brands, sellers, and then how can we build the operations around that? Because in the end, it's a new thing within Kingfisher. The more I talk to other retailers, the more I talk to people like you, the more reassuring we get that we're doing the right thing. So right now, we have been live for almost a year in B&Q. I can tell you that we have exceeded our expectation in terms of the ROAS that we're delivering to our brands and vendors. We're going above the benchmark in Amazon, which prove the vertical of DIY and home improvement make it more out of every brand and vendor, out of each pound that they invest versus Amazon, for example. And that's a true magic of our special retail media network in our industry, right? Also, we take advantage of our leadership position in the UK. And when I compare it to our position in France, for example, where we don't have that leadership position yet, we need to work even more for our pounds to be invested in our retail media network. So that's it. We have our on-site capabilities, trialing in-store, trialing off-site, and overarching data monetization at the same time.
Well, let's talk about that data piece. How are you incorporating first-party data and third-party data, if you are, into what you're offering to partners?
Yes. So we are very proud of everything that we have done the past 2 years in our data platform. So I can tell you that right now we have visibility of all the availability, pricing, stock levels, sell-in, sell-out data. And we said, this is the first dimension that we're going to tackle to monetize that, to optimize campaign. So if I know as a brand or a supplier, I know the availability of our stock in specific locations and in our online platform, then I will be able to react much more consciously about every pound that I invest. So we have been developing those capabilities and tried it out with first, let's call it 10 to 15 brands. And now we are expanding that into much more sophisticated dashboard and activation of that data. So now a brand and a vendor in B&Q and in France, in Cost of France, can have the visibility of those KPIs and activate campaigns accordingly to their stock and sell-in, sell-out data. The next adventure for that will be customer data. And how are we pulling our customer view into that setup where a brand and vendor will not only be able to optimize their campaign based on their product, but also who are they targeting within our customer base. And that's our obsession right now.
You've set up a self-serve platform for your partners to come in and see?
Correct.
And what's powering that? Have you built that yourself, or is that powered by a third party?
So we have built our own data lake and our own data platform. Then the way it's being visualized, it's powered by Power BI capabilities, but in a much more sophisticated way, which is our second stage of this. We have partnered with a company called Convertio, who are bringing all the expertise from dunnhumby to utilize that data and showcasing it to the brands and vendors so they can do a self-service. So it's a web app in the end where brands and vendor can access to their own data, benchmark it within the same category, for example. And what's the market share of your products versus the top main competitors that you have? Hence, you will be able to activate that campaign through retail media capabilities.
Brilliant. And then how are you serving on-site ads? Well, there's two bits there you talked about. One was data monetization. Let's start with that. Are you pushing the data downstream, or is it at the moment just there to optimize campaigns with?
The moment is just for optimization of campaigns. Our aim is to have a full stack data capability. So from pulling out data, understanding and getting the valuable insights, but then how it's connected to all our platforms that in the case of on-site, for example, we have partnered with Unlimited and Citrus Ads. So they are our partners for on-site, how we will connect that to feed those insights and activate that data. So that's our end goal next year.
Fantastic. And then how about the in-store piece then? You talked about trialing that. Tell me how you're trialing that and what's going on there. Because obviously you're very heavily store-led and people still like to go into the stores. Tell me about it.
This is probably the most fascinating piece of my work right now, because probably you and I, we have the same vision of how our retail media works from a digital perspective. But when you go in store, it's a completely different world. You need to take into account so many variables that, for example, when you build up a platform, you build up your requirements. Who is the customer? What will be the journey? How do you the checkout? All that journey. But when you're in store, the variables are another. What's the foot traffic? What type of products are we dealing with? So you understand how the customer moves around the store, or even if you go down to the details of what type of medium you want to place there and how does that play with the type of product that you have. Let's say that you put a screen at the foyer of the store, but you will see people coming in and out. But if you are purchasing, let's say, a big, massive product, that product can go into the screens, right? So you don't want that to happen, which is something that probably you don't find in groceries retailers because they don't deal with that volume product. So those kind of details are the ones that we're mapping out. We're testing different in-store screens, but the question is how we measure and how we track performance of those campaigns that we are running as a trial right now. We discuss in our initial conversation, eye tracking, camera feeding into the profiling of the customer that we're visiting. But we want to go beyond that. We want to understand how we get the opt-in of the customer that it's installed to be tracked, because we are over-compliant at the same time. But then having a much more passive approach of the customer that it's in there. So we know that they are engaging with the campaigns without asking them to do anything, right? And this is connected to my previous experiences, is that how can you utilize apps and our apps? So we know our customers, we can know when they are in the store, and we can know in which type of location they are in the store. And at the same time, we know what they purchase. So we will know what type of incrementality are we driving based on the campaigns that we have. And that's kind of like the end game for us when we talk about in-store. How we connect that to an omni-channel retail media value proposition, that's the basis of data. So again, if we go back to that initial point where I know the availability, I know the stock, I know the selling and sell-out data, I will know through which channel I have sold that. In B&Q, for example, that's how we connect the journey of an omni-channel retail media network. That's why our obsession is data.
It'll be an amazing journey, that. So that technology that you're putting into the stores, is that being driven by retail media, or is the business already doing that and then you're leveraging it?
This is a question with intention, because you know that within a retailer, when you touch any trade marketing activity, it's very disruptive. The good thing is that we have been partnering very well with our commercial team, with our traders, with our buying team, because we know that they have a big chunk of that trade marketing activity, especially when we talk about in-store activities. Sponsor products in our e-commerce, that's another world, easy to justify in front of our commercial teams and traders. But let's talk about homepage banner, where we are pushing our rebates and promos, but in-store when you activate a promotion as well. The magic of our conversation with our commercial and trading team has been we can leverage that with our own capabilities. So you will be able to report in real time the performance of that, and not waiting 30, 60, 90 days to get back to your brand and vendor and show what you have approved in terms of incrementality, for example. What we're saying is that with the retail media, we will be able to unlock faster budgets and much more frequently in their media plans throughout the year. And that has worked, especially because when we talk about, for example, marketplace, and you put your 1P business and your 3P business together, that also makes the commercial and trading team motivated to engage much more with friends and vendor and offer them retail media services because the competition is getting tighter. CPCs are increasing in our POP pages. Hence, you will have to be active in your trading plans to offer retail media services. That's how we are putting it together.
So that whole conversation around the trade, sort of your contract, your product buyers, at the moment, is the strategy to try and increase those JPP budgets, or is it to drive incremental from consumer budgets? And then how are you doing both those two things, if they are both?
Again, this is a very intentional question. That means that you know about retailer. So at the beginning, we're treating this as incremental, so on top of the budgets that we can get. But we already see 1P brands and vendors who already see the value of retail media, and they're starting to include that in their trading marketing budget. So let's say at first entry value proposition, it's treated as an incremental on the budget. But after that first stage, it becomes a standard in their trade marketing budget. And I give you an example that it's not in the UK, but in our operating company in France, in Castorama France, where we have been live for a year and a half with our retail media network. When we started, we were already past beyond the trade marketing budgets for the year. So it was hard to get retail media budget from that trade marketing budget. We tested in a very beneficial conditions for our brands and vendor. They saw the benefit of it. And right now we are already including their retail media budgets for next year as a secure activation.
Yeah. So are there still a suite of separate opportunities that your partners are buying as part of their original trade thing that sits separately to what you're now offering from a digitalized, datafied retail media solution?
Correct. I mean, in the end, look, for us,
it's a journey.
Yeah. And we have another mix into this potion that we're building. It's that we have our own exclusive brands. We own brands that play at the same time with 1P vendors, 3P sellers, and our brands. So it's a master operation that we need to put together. But in the end, our message to our 1P and 3P sellers is that competition is getting higher, but we have the customers. We can give you quality customers that will uplift your conversion if you do this type of activities that can get you real-time performance tracking. Hence, you will be able to optimize. And is on top of that, you put the data and transparency as an overarching to manage that relationship, then you have the perfect setup to leverage all the budget that you can get from brands and vendors.
Yeah. And obviously your retail media organization is designed to really help those third-party brands. How much pressure do you get from the business because you have your own brand activity? How much are they saying, well, we need some of that space, we need to carve that off for us? How are you managing that?
Correct. So here is where we are very protective of our business, but at the same time, we're over compliance of how we trade with our brands and vendors. So the good thing is that within Kingfisher and within our operating companies, the team that owns our brands are completely separate. So it's a way of treating our own exclusive brand as an additional brand and vendor that it's trading in our e-commerce and in-store. And when you add retail media, this is basically my past year has been training them, educating them, giving them the right tools to operate retail media activities within our company. So for us, it's like a lab where we test things. So I have an own exclusive brand team that need to understand how they operate retail media activities. So before going into the market with our brands and third-party sellers, I test those with our own exclusive brand and say, okay, I can streamline that type of ad ops or that type of CPC yield management into 1P and 3P sellers. And that's how we build a proposition in a fair game when everyone is competing for the same sponsor product start, right?
Yeah, very good. It's always a testing one, that one, and how it's a piece of stakeholder management that's definitely required.
Correct. Yeah, a lot. A lot.
So tell me about the onboarding of partners then. So if you can tell me, how many partners have you got and how many are actually are using your retail media network? And then also, how are you going to market? How are you engaging with them and bringing them on board?
So across all our group, meaning across all our operating companies that have a retail media network running, in the past year, we have onboarded more than 400 brands and sellers. This is a combination between 1P and third-party sellers. The onboarding and the strategy that we're following is, for 1P vendor, we tend to do managed services. And this is the main difference, because when you talk to a grocery retailer or a much more, let's say, veteran in retail media activities, such as Tesco or Sainsbury, the brands know already how to operate within a retail media network. In DIY and home improvement, we're not there yet. So we need to provide them managed services so they can get the assurance of how can they build later on those capabilities internally. But in the meantime, we are offering their managed services. And that means from the setup of how the platform works, of course, the contracting, the media planning, and the activation of that campaigns, and the optimization of those campaigns as well. When we talk about third-party sellers, the approach is completely different. We know that the budgets are lower, but much more granular. And we know that those sellers are already selling and trading in platforms such as Amazon or in Cdiscount in France or in Allegro in Poland. They already know how that operates, and they do a self-service approach. Hence, we can expedite the way they go live with a campaign. They know how to do yield management of CPC. They know how to optimize their budget. They already sensed what's the daily cap to not exceed or not to exhaust their daily budget and keep that prominent position in our PLPs. What it's true is that whenever you go for 3P sellers, they will be obsessed about sponsor products, while in 1P, to prove real return of investment for every pound that they invest in our retail media network, you need to diversify their media plan, because they will not go only for one sponsor product. They need brand presence, they need conversion touchpoint, they need cross-selling opportunities. That's why we have been accelerating our on-site capabilities so we can prove better media planning. That's our strategy.
And then with that sort of extending products, are you doing much audience extension? So away from the site using your data?
So that's probably the most complex thing for us. I told you, our first dimension has been first-party vendor performance data. Customer data, we're running against the clock to build that customer single view so we can do that audience extension and drive traffic, let's call it offsite channels, and how we activate those. And that's something that it's our bet for next year. It's true, and this is something that also I told you in the beginning, is that we're very protective of our margins. We're convinced that retail media is a very high margin business. We have to prove that already. When we talk about offsite and audience extension, that's when we get the question, it's like, let's test it first and see the margins around that before we invest. Because first, you need lots of tech investment, and IT CapEx goes very up. But at the same time, you need operations to run that. You need a partnership probably with a media agency to help you with that. And that's another type of channel that requires another type of operation. So we are in a process of setting that up for next year.
Fantastic. We've only got a few minutes left, sadly, but just a question around the international piece. Obviously, I have a deep experience in rolling things internationally. Obviously, the 195. In fact, Platform 195 is the number of countries in the world. Tell me how you're navigating that international piece. Where are you centralizing? Where are you localizing? How are you doing that?
So the thing is that we have different realities in our markets. We have a consolidated leadership position in the UK with B&Q, and we drive lots of traffic online with Screwfix. So the combination of those two, it's amazing because you can test lots of things on site in B&Q, but at the same time, you can test lots of things on site that will deliver capabilities in our stores in Screwfix because they are highly connected. While in France and Poland and in Spain, the approach is different because this is what we called our big box operating companies, big stores fighting for market share. In France, when we compare it to Adele and Leroy Merlin, we know that we need to do much more. So what we do is, even though that our on-site, for example, platform is a single one, share across all our operating companies, we know that we need to go faster in France because we're a very competitive market. While in the UK, we can understand that, well, let's start with sponsor products, let's start with cross-selling, let's trial in-store, while in France, we need to go faster. So what we do is, from a group perspective, is we leverage the opportunity of going fast in France, go fast, implement, learn, and then apply those into B&Q. And of course, I'm talking to this, and I have lots of tiers in those operating companies that run the retail media business. But what I do is I connect those learnings and insights, and how can we streamline? How can we leverage our position even when we do partnerships? Because in the end, we can pull all the volume of all our business across all our markets. But at the same time, while the teams in the operating companies are running that retail media network and basically being very provocative, let's say ahead, or let's get that insight. Let's talk to another retailer, see how they have been doing that. And at the same time, the data capabilities are centralized because that way we can utilize that for international brands that want to run their business through all our operating companies. Then data is centralized. And that's how we have been approaching the expansion of our retail media networks.
Very smart. I think if you can get that big group leverage on the partners and the deals and pooling that volume, as well as then centralizing how you deliver and all of that knowledge and data, it's the right way. Listen, we're nearly out of time, Dany, but it's been an absolutely brilliant podcast. But listen, we've still got time for one bit of fun. So I've been doing this thing at the end of the podcast called Rose, Thorn, Bud. And this is something I do with my kids in order to get them to open up when they come home from school rather than give me one-word answers. For them, Rose is something that was great that happened that day. Thorn is something that wasn't so good. And then Bud is something that they're looking forward to. So if we translate that to you and the retail media world and Kingfisher, tell us the Rose being, something that you're really proud of. You think that's going really, really well. The Thorn, something that's a bit of a challenge and you're really trying to work out how to get over that. And then Bud, what are you looking forward to? What does the future look like? Should we start with the Rose?
Yes, of course. Always starting with positive things. I think I'm very proud of how we have accelerated our digital capabilities in Kingfisher the past 4 years. I said the trigger was the pandemic, but it was a very much needed transformation. And I look back on everything that we have done, and where we are right now with our marketplace model, with our retail media capabilities, with our data platform, how we are leveraging AI capabilities and introducing that into our e-commerce platform. That I'm absolutely proud, and makes me wake up every day and say, okay, let's see what we find today in the office when I talk to my peers. And that's something I'm really proud. This is something challenging. I think probably the complexity of working in a big corporate, and probably many people have told you this, but you need to drive loads of change management. And people normally are used to stay put if everything's going well. And that's one of the reasons I joined Kingfisher is, okay, let's try to be disruptive, but conscious at the same time. So challenging that status quo to drive change, it's something that shouldn't cost that much in terms of effort and time. But we have improved a lot. And hence everything that we have done in the past 4 years, probably that change management time, dedication. It is.
I used to laugh about the silent protesters. It's the people who don't say anything. You're thinking, why hasn't that happened? And then there's somebody there who doesn't like what you're doing, but isn't going to tell you. They're better off telling you and you can do something about it. But they don't tell you. It's very hard to find it.
Exactly. And drops an email with all the assessment afterwards. Like, okay, I should have known that even in advance, right?
Yeah. And then the Bard, what are you looking forward to? What's next?
So I think next year it's going to be amazing, basically, because we're going to have our retail media networks live in all our operating companies. So it's going to be, okay, now this is the real game. So now how we grow our business, how we implement customer data activation, how we connect even more our stores to our retail media proposition. So next year it's going to be the real foundations of how this business is going to grow. And also proving wrong and demystifying things that we have in our plans. Saying, okay, we have proved the margins, we have proved the revenue, we have proved the operation model. Now let's scale it. And that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. And you need that kind of North Star and you'll get there.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
Dany, we're out of time, so sadly. Thank you so much. It's just been a fantastic podcast. Thanks for coming on. I think it's really exciting. You've got that international opportunity and making a difference there and driving that change. And then really interesting to hear about the Amazon, how you're sort of beating them in ROAS in the vertical. That's really exciting to hear, really encouraging for the rest of the industry. Yeah, and really interesting to see how you carry on leveraging that first-party data in the omnichannel world and bridge that gap or help bring your partners away from sort of standard trade budgets into a hybrid of retail media and trade. So look, thank you so much for coming on. As I often say, fantastic if you could come back on soon or in some months' time and be able to come and show us how you've moved everything along. It'd be really exciting for everyone to hear.
Be more than happy to tell more about in a year where we are.
Great. Thanks, Dany.
Thank you very much.
The Retail Media Moguls podcast is brought to you by Platform 195. To learn more about Platform 195 and how to connect retail media with intelligent marketing to accelerate growth, visit platform195.com. And then make sure to search for Retail Media Moguls in Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Platform 195, thanks for listening.